Alright everyone, it's time to point out that there is actually election interference occurring in the United States in the run-up to November. Not the fake kind that's peddled by the bullshit media, the corporate press. Not the Ma Russia stuff. Not the Ma Trump hates the First Amendment, he hates journalism stuff. No, I mean real election interference. Now, the biggest story never told by the leftist advocacy groups is that the real election interference is taking the form of a bunch of political speech on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and so forth being banned, causing deplatforming by billionaires. Billionaires run the companies that are doing this. These companies, in turn, are basically monopolistic. There's a vertical monopoly within Silicon Valley at this point. A half dozen companies fundamentally control everything. Because they control the structure of apps, the lines of communication, and everything else, because they control every aspect of the visibility side of the internet, smaller firms are essentially forced into a situation where they can either cuck out, and they are simply, at that point, BitChute would become a subsidiary of YouTube. In a general sense, if these sites actually do what Google and Apple and these others want them to do, they become subjugate to them. They're no longer even competitors. They're this basically 2.0 smaller, so-called independent version of the site for the purposes of profitability that in many cases isn't even there, and even then they may get deplatformed. We've seen that before. Saw that partially with VidMe. They went under. They decided they completely removed politics and news from their trending and their algorithms, and yet they still got hammered. They still got called platforming hate and so forth. We've seen this before. I'm increasingly concerned that what we're seeing is a pseudo-oligarchy, a plutocratic movement in which a very small number of extremely wealthy people essentially control not just the communications apparatus of the US, but the entire world. And you've got people who supposedly are not, like the Sleeping Giants groups, actively promote this kind of thing. They actively promote the concept, supposedly from a left-wing angle. These are supposedly socialists. We love the working class, the common man, corporate power bad. This is sort of standard leftist rhetoric. But they literally lean on corporate sponsors in order to try to get billionaires to destroy people who they find problematic. In many cases, the problematic nature doesn't even really exist. In most cases, the people that they call a Nazi are not Nazis. It's sort of like when they whine when someone gets labeled a communist, by me usually jokingly. Yeah, okay, in many cases they're not. They follow a broadly left-wing perspective. Likewise, there are plenty of people who have conservative beliefs who are not Nazis. There are people with certain beliefs about Islam or things like that who are not bigoted whatsoever. They approach it from a historical or civic perspective. Case in point, Laura Loomer. Laura Loomer, who is probably going to win a House seat in Florida, by the way, Trump's district no less, the one with the Mar-a-Lago, which is going to be very fun. I'm sure that she will be invited frequently into the Mar-a-Lago to golf with the president. I'm joking. Her views, by and large, are not outside of the mainstream of the Republican Party, including her views on Islam. They may be more reluctant to state them openly, but her views overall, from Israel and BDS through taxation, with everything except for guns and corporate censorship, aren't outside of the main line. So why would she be deplatformed off of the visible internet? And she can't even use Uber to drive around. Why would this happen? It's because she's independent. It's because despite the fact that her views are not particularly outside of the mainstream, she's not on the take, so to speak. What these billionaires are doing is trying to allow the entrenched majority of politics to continue. These entrenched individuals have taken Silicon Valley money. So they'll pay a big lip service to the problem of censorship by corporations, but they won't do anything about it. The handful of people that will, Trump, Rand Paul, Loomer, and so forth, look at what Twitch just did. Twitch literally just suspended, temporarily, the Trump campaign's official channel from streaming based on his comments about Mexicans being violent, which is, you fact check it, it's absurd. It's not even what he was saying at the time, and by the way, is an old clip. You're talking about things from years ago being used in order for, again, a massive multinational corporation run by extremely rich people to literally disable the campaigning abilities of a literal standing president of the United States. The fact is that 10 years ago, one of the biggest things the left said is there's too much corporate money in politics. Well, what's the difference between corporate money in politics in the direct sense and corporate money in politics in the indirect sense of them meddling with the election? What's the difference? And how can you reasonably call yourself an enlightened liberal individual or even a rational leftist if you support that corporate power being used as a cudgel? What you should be doing is you should be engaging in activism. But that's not activism. Whether you're on the left or on the right, that's not activism to try to shut people up, in direct violation, by the way, of the First Amendment and Section 230 in many cases with these companies. If you're platforming government figures, you're platforming government services, you're getting subsidies from the state of California, you exist under a legislative framework designed to give you a de facto monopoly in exchange for you not editorializing, and all you do is editorialize, censor, and ban people who you disagree with, based on the fact that you're a billionaire and you're worried about independent minds having a political opinion and having too much leverage, I see that as intrinsically problematic. It's not leftist at all. If anything, it's fascistic in a more literal sense. The literal fusion of a bunch of billionaires, of industry elites, with the government at the most fundamental level, to the point where they've become powerful and they've become brazen enough at this point to deplatform the President of the United States. Keep that in mind. This is the leader of the free world. I know that a lot of this is hyperbolic bullshit, but leader of the free world, most powerful man in the world, chief executive of the United States, stuff, getting deplatformed by Twitch, having his tweets hidden, getting constantly attacked by Google and his people who like him demoted in the algorithms or outright deplatformed on multiple sites. Is this not a form of election interference? Perhaps instead of looking at Russia with a gigantic magnifying glass to try to find some element of post-KGB Putinist corruption, maybe we should take a step back, because the room is filled with corruption. It's as plain as day. You don't need a microscope or a magnifying glass to see it. You don't need any particular investigation at all to see that billionaires are objectively screwing with the political fabric of the United States right now. Some of these people run companies that are practically as valuable as Russia, and yet we're focused on that. We're focused on, well, a Russian troll farm encompassing like 12 people that sued the government, by the way, for their prosecution, bought like $100,000 in Facebook ads. Oh, that's very nifty. 6 figures. I wish I had that 100 grand. By the way, I could do better things with it. I could probably change more minds than the Russian troll farm did with its astroturfed shitty memes. Meanwhile, a billionaire can flip the switch and apparently ban the President of the United States from speaking to millions of people, because that's the way that increasingly everyone gets their political news anyway. People don't get it from TV anymore. Nobody watches fucking TV. Nobody fucking gives a shit. Something like 20 million people tuned into the live streams watching the last Trump rally, the one in Tulsa, and supposedly that was a big failure. And by the way, it was because of that they started banning more people. I bet anything that it was the fact that over the last 4 years, the digital world has gone from powerful but ultimately not quite as powerful as real-life campaigning and TV and stuff, to being more powerful than them all combined. The internet is the future of politics. We can no longer sit back and allow a handful of billionaires to basically control the political structure, because that's exactly what's happening. The amount of propaganda and slime coming from these plutocrats, these anti-competitive, monopolistic, interventionist jerk-offs with ties, deep pockets, and ties to Congress because they buy off senators on the reg, especially from California, because that's where Silicon Valley is. That's unacceptable. It's un-American, unpatriotic, unethical. It's certainly not pragmatic. It's a great way to fuck up the internet long-term as well. The internet that we all use and enjoy is being fucked sideways by these people. And it's being applauded by a bunch of so-called enlightened leftists. It's very interesting how the left have become the new book burners of the generation. I can fondly remember a time when the biggest censorship issue was that your local Christian Moms Association wanted to ban Harry Potter from the public library and got told to fuck themselves. That was the big censorship of the 90s. In the 2000s, oh, well, the FCC has a problem with Eminem saying fuck on the radio. It has a big problem with rap-o-crap and stuff like that. That was the big problem. Now, though, it's the community, but that was always limited because, you see, there were never a majority of people making rap music, a majority of people making best-selling novels. That never happened. Now it's the majority. Most people make content online of some sort or another. They take pictures on their Insta, and then they send the dick pics on Snapchat or whatever. They make YouTube videos. They do a Facebook stream. They go on Twitch or D Live or something. That's Most people in the Western world do that at this point. Most people are creators at this point. People have become remarkably creative. I think part of it is money related because they're flooding the market with stuff and it's making it difficult for celebrities. It's hard to compete with 10,000 other people doing exactly the same thing. Creators like me who made it earlier and who have the finesse to have a large audience, we're a threat to the lame establishment. That's ultimately what it's about. It's about money at the core, but it's beginning to interfere with our political system, and it needs to be stopped. Congress must get involved. The problem, of course, is that most of Congress is on the take from Facebook and Google and these other sites to the tune of hundreds of millions a year. They have massive stockpiles of money, and they filter it through ActBlue, and they filter it through bundling groups for the GOP, and it gets dispensed at the state level and then gets given earmarked to candidates. Usually in the 5- and 6-figure total. It's a huge amount of money, even in local elections. They probably influence mayoral elections at this point just for kicks, just for shits and giggles. Unfortunately, between Citizens United and the monopolistic 230 structure of Silicon Valley, it remains to be seen how the issue is actually solved other than the public massively turning against it, which is something I've predicted. How many people have to suffer before that happens? And I mean, the damage in some cases is irreversible. People end up rage quitting entire careers, and their fans, people, sometimes millions of people who like their content, they suffer as a result of that. And I just think, I mean, at some point, you know, not to be wax emotional or something, but it just comes off as mean and evil-spirited from these billionaires like Uncle Pennybags-style people constantly fucking around with people who, in many cases, they're just regular working and middle-class people who happen to have a webcam. It's just mean-spirited, it's wrong, it's unethical, it's un-American, it's also in some ways unconstitutional and illegal already because of the non-editorial function that's supposed to be served by 230, among other things. And the very idea of equal access, equal protection under the law, when you're talking about sites that get government subsidies, that platform government services like USGS alerts that could literally lead to someone dying because they didn't get the Twitter alert. Could literally happen. There could be people out there that are dead because they got deplatformed off some service, some app that allowed them to in some way defend themselves. Apps that are developed that get kicked off of the app stores and disappear from the public function entirely because Apple doesn't like them and because Google agrees with Apple. A literal duopoly in that case. And I just think that it's totally unacceptable the way things are going. It's beginning to look more and more like China's social credit score system. Do we literally want to be, I mean, I hate to be hyperbolic maybe, but do we literally want to be like communist China? That's increasingly what Silicon Valley functions as. And part of it is they want to do business in China too, so they want to censor things preemptively. That's about all. Peace out.